Welcome to Season 3 of the Knack for Business podcast. Over 390 episodes strong, we're here to ignite your entrepreneurial spirit with fresh insights, networking gems, and creative strategies that elevate your game.
From the audience perspective, how do you develop real leadership skills that actually help you handle complex team dynamics without relying on outdated or rigid training methods? That's exactly what Janet's going to be touching on today as we dive into this whole leadership development, like her Leader Forge game, which can help entrepreneurs, founders, and small business leaders grow into confident, emotionally intelligent leaders who thrive in today's fast-changing and often chaotic world. Our guest today is Janet du Preez from Engagement Dynamics. Let me tell you a bit about Janet. She is drawing on great theory, creative methods, and genius network. Her mission is to design, develop, and deliver the most beautiful, useful, irresistible, transformative leader development solutions on the planet. The Astute Leader Program and a Leader Forge game are two such solutions. Developed in collaboration with trusted partners, Janet has a Master in Science in the Management of Technology and Innovation and focused her award-winning dissertation on improving stakeholder engagement in the context of wicked problems. She believes that it's imperative that we effectively develop 21st century leaders to deal with the real-world challenges of change, complexity, and conflict. Janet, it's an absolute pleasure having you here. Welcome. Do you have a favorite quote or saying?
So the one I always go back to is look for very big problems because they disguise very big opportunities.
And you have a business tagline, don't you?
I do. Maximizing leadership impact. And there's a whole big story behind that.
You know what? I've heard in the past, we've had other guest speakers talk about play, and it's a good way to learn new things. But leadership and play, usually you don't, it's like saying, dear teacher, can you play with us? No, I must teach you. It's almost like the adult-child relationship and so forth. What does that mean to be leadership and through play?
So I think, first of all, it's fun. And a lot of businesses could do with it more fun. But there are some very important scientific reasons why that is the case. The first is that play adjusts your mental state and gets your brain into a receptive attitude. It's looking observant, alive, and open. That's one of the most important reasons why play matters, especially when it comes to learning. I think the other reason is that none of us wants to do things that are boring. If something is experienced as fun, then people are going to be more likely to engage, to show up, to invest themselves, which is one of my meanings of engagement, to invest themselves and bring their whole selves, their minds, their bodies. So the more fun we can make it, the more likely it is that people are actually going to show up. Another thing I talk about when it comes to engagement is return on investment. People engage because they're going to get a return. If they're not getting a return, they're more likely to hold back. Return is obviously a complex concept. It's not just about money, but enjoyment is a really good return on investment. A couple of reasons why I think play is important, especially in the context of learning. I also believe it's important in the context of leadership. We're going to talk more about leadership, but the same principles apply.
What is a wicked problem?
So as you can see, I spent a little bit of time studying that during my master's. And you know what a wicked problem is. You just may not know that's what it's called, unless you've heard me speak before. Wicked problems is a term coined in the 1960s by a man by the name of Churchman. It was originated in the environment of policy and government. And this guy was looking at some of these big problems that leaders, particularly in government and nonprofit organizations, have to deal with. And he decided they needed a name. The wicked problem is a problem that's probably never going to go away. They're those big, complex, difficult, intricate problems that are going to be with us probably forever. I'll give you a couple of examples. Poverty is a really good example of a wicked problem. There will always be people who are relatively poor. Climate change is proving to be a massive, wicked problem. And we can do all sorts of things. The chances are that we're not solving that one in a hurry, probably not in our lifetimes. Gender-based violence is another one that I feel particularly strongly about, and I think it's important that we keep talking about it. The truth is, we will always have people who are slightly bonkers, or more than slightly bonkers, and who will intentionally cause another person harm. And that's so sad, but it's a reality that we can't actually get away with. So all of those examples of wicked problems, they have some very specific characteristics. And a couple of those we will probably come back to and talk about just now, but they are always dynamic and changing. So even defining them can be difficult because one day they're different from the day before. They're always nested in very complex systems. So there are lots of variables and lots of intricacies and lots of interconnections that effectively house the problems, again, making it very difficult to isolate them. And then thirdly, there's usually a lot of conflict within the context. And conflict is not necessarily World War III. Conflict is simply a gap or a difference. And you come up with any of these problems, and invariably you're going to have very polarized and differing perspectives. That makes it very difficult for people to come together and actually resolve them. But what I do need to say is they can't be resolved. So that's one of the other challenges. The thing is, however, we can't ignore them because they are profoundly impactful. We have no choice but to intervene. The good news is that often they are actually influenceable. So that's the positive side of wicked problems.
You've found a way to gamify your training with something called Leadership Forge. Tell me a story.
Wayne, Leadership Forge is actually very interesting. It is a leadership identity game that I was very privileged to develop in partnership with an amazing company called Two Name Games. Two Name Games happens to be run by my daughter, my son-in-law, and two of their good friends. They are all skilled game designers. The idea for Leader Forge was conceived because I have a 24-year-old daughter who studied game design. She is a dungeon master and loves to play Dungeons and Dragons with her friends and loves, whenever we are together, to tell me all about these games. I didn't really know what she was talking about. Anyway, the more I listened, the more I learned. She used to tell me about the character creation process for Dungeons and Dragons and other similar role-playing games. These games begin by people defining what their character looks like. I have developed a leader development program, which I call the Astute Leader Program. I was looking for an original way to market the program. Listening to my daughter in the car one day, I had one of these playful aha moments, and I thought, what if we use this process as a way for leaders to take a look in the mirror and see themselves from a different perspective? So their characters are not fantasy characters. They are actually themselves put into a different situation. Leader Forge was born. We had a really good soft launch online, and it went so well that we ran it again. And I invited the team from Two Name Games to come and play with us. We were running it 1 hour a night over 6 nights. They stayed for the whole week and then came to me afterwards and said, we think we can make this better. Can we do this together? And so that's exactly what happened. It's a fabulous solution that we are still really just launching formally. We did a lot more work on it and turned it into a very exciting product. It's set in the futuristic African city of Kazuka. And we're having fun doing some more graphics at the moment.
So is it like a board game, or is it an interactive game? Is it an online game? Is it a mixed bag of can do it in person, can do it remotely? What?
We prefer to deliver it as an analog game in person. in our clients' environments. That's definitely first prize. And we've got beautiful boards, and there are stickers, and they put stickers on their boards, and they take their boards home at the end of the day and get to actually carry forward what they've developed and discovered. However, we also run it online on a Miro board. Fortunately, I'm quite adept at using the Miro board, so I facilitate it online. We are in the process of developing a fully digital version. It's coming and will make life a lot easier in terms of running it across the seas.
Do you see it becoming a standalone game in a box without the leadership, where we can go buy $60 and get a game and play it with your friends, your colleagues? Is that one of the goals?
Wayne, I'm going to say not. It's not beyond the realms of possibility. The closest I could equate it to, if you're talking those terms, is probably Robert Kiyosaki's cash flow game. Maximum benefit is definitely derived when there are deep, rich conversations. That's certainly not impossible for people to run themselves, but I think there's a greater benefit to doing it with a trained facilitator.
So when people are playing the game, what revelations do they have? What epiphanies pop out and go, hey, but wait, there's more?
There have been a number of examples. What I most enjoy as a facilitator, working with playful solutions and using play within leadership development, is you can never predict what's going to happen. I usually talk about it as I'm laying out a magnificent buffet table. Take your pick and see what happens. That really is the way I design most of my interventions. The best part is just the surprise of seeing what happens. A couple of lovely examples. The very first big aha that made me realize, oh, we're onto something, was a very well-known professional speaker in my circle. And he had this absolute epiphany from just one card that he selected. And I know that for several weeks after that, he was playing with the idea of what did it mean to be a scout? And what did that look like in his business and his environment? So that was the first aha. We ran the game with the TNG team, wanted to try it out for themselves before they started working on it. They were a brand new business, just starting out. But there were 4 people who actually know each other extremely well. So we got around their dining room table. It was the first time we had run it face to face. And we could have probably been there all day because they were popping revelations and having conversations. They believed they were really privileged to have had that experience as they were getting their business going. As a result of some of the conversations during the game, they developed particular ways of working that they're still using a year later and that have become embedded in their company. That was really exciting to hear. And then the other thing that always just intrigues me, and I almost expect it now, is there's a point at the end of the game where we reveal a calling that is implied by the choices that they have made. And the participants' faces when they look at me and go with these really big eyes, and they go, how did that work? Because they really identify with the calling that they have chosen through the choices that they've made, through the cards that they've selected. And so it's always lovely just to see their faces when that happens.
It's always powerful in a small group, but does this have a top end as well? Or do you break it into like teams of 12, or can a room of 200 play it? Or
So Wayne, it has not been tried yet. However, we did have a client who came to us a couple of months ago, huge multinational, and said that they had a big leader event that they will be running, and they were considering using this for the event. They said they are actually tired of very expensive speakers who stand up in front of the crowd and wow them for an hour, and then nobody remembers a thing after the event. And so they were looking to say, is there a way that we could maybe do something more gameful They were looking for something that was more gameful, and talking about a group of 400 people. And so we went and then had a conversation, and we have come up with ways in which we can deliver this for 400 people. They would be in groups around tables, and the interactions would probably be more difficult to facilitate because part of the game is having conversations in small groups. In that context, we would do it in pairs rather than in groups of 2, 3, or 4. There might be a very noisy room, but people would be engaged. There are a lot of moving parts, so there are lots of cards, lots of stickers. So we would be very busy setting it up, but it is doable. And with the right team and the right budget, no question.
If you're a company and they go, listen, I need to work on something, do they come to you and say, hi, this is what we're seeing as an issue? Whether they've honed it in or an expert's come in and say, yeah, this is your malaise. Here are some symptoms and trigger points that's causing this issue. Do you shape the game then to address those issues, or is it all encompassing? In other words, listen, you got this part right, but this part you have a gap that you need to fill and fix. Is that how the game works?
But Bernie, the answer is yes and no. You were asking about aha moments, and what we've seen is that they have these very important revelations, especially around their team dynamics while playing the game. One team we worked with got progressively through the sort of 3-hour period and got near the end. And when I was going and just checking how they were doing, one after another, they were saying, we don't have time to think. And we're realizing this playing the game. Another group, and we weren't actually playing the game, we were doing something else, game with them. And they got to the end of their session and said to us, we don't have time to connect. And this is impacting how we work together. It's impacting productivity. You've got a lovely question that I hope we're going to answer just now that talked about results and accountability. But let me quickly first answer your actual question, that it really does depend. It depends on the level of relationship that I have with the client. At the moment, I've just sent a proposal to a client I've been working with for 3 years. And some issues have emerged within the team, within the senior leadership. And I have proposed to them, let's play the game before we start trying to tackle the conflicts and the challenges. Let's do some thinking around complexity and change and conflict, which come up as principles in the game. We work with those 3 dynamics of complexity, change, and conflict, and we find that they're pretty universal. The scenarios that people play with in the game, when they actually test out the choices that they've made, are based on those 3 dynamics. But the game is also fully customizable. It's very simple for us to change those scenarios and come up with some that, should a client say they actually want to focus in on a particular area, it's a 2-hour job. That's it, done.
Whether it is using different parts of the brain or takes the ego out of it, does the playfulness keep HR and lawsuits out of it as a rule? What is it about the game that makes conflict more bearable?
What a great question. I was thinking about it because you gave me a little heads up, not only in relation to LeaderForge, but process a few weeks back with another big multinational company. They came to us and they said, we've had a change project that's gone horribly wrong. We've been working together, trying to redefine our processes, trying to get everything back on track. It's an Africa-wide project, but we want to now just focus on our ways of working. And so we asked them for 2 days. They gave us 4 hours. We asked them for some lead in. Could we do some assessments? Could we get some feedback? They said, no, this is what we've got. We are going to have to use some playful methodologies here. And the one thing that you don't really want as a facilitator when you are looking at a conflict situation is you don't actually want conflict to erupt on the day. But you do want to bring people to a point of realization of where they maybe need to make some changes. And secondly, a way forward that is constructive. So we had a number of gameful exercises that we used. One favorite, which I will mention, we call it challenges, gorillas, nuts, and death knells. And we get people to explore the challenges that are happening in their environment, many of which are actually just caused by themselves. For example, a gorilla is something we are ignoring because we are so focused on one thing that we don't even realize the gorilla is in the room. The nuts are things we do as a habit, but they are completely nuts. They make no sense. We're having a little bit of fun thinking about these concepts. And then they start to list the things and they know they are behaving in these ways. Instead of people pointing fingers at each other and going, but what you do is nuts, they're going, we do this and it's nuts. And then we just collect all that data and provide them with a report and show them in a mirror what it looks like. We don't ignore the conflict, but we air it in a very different kind of way. And it works really well.
When you're done with the game, how long is the game played? And when do they have results? The epiphany is in the moment, all right, in the heat of the moment. There's the game, maybe an epiphany, and then is there a follow-up game? Do you keep playing it? How do you know that the ship is turning in the right direction, catching the wind the right way?
So that is a very good question. I don't have a perfect answer to it. The first thing to say is we've all been socialized into the idea that a game has a winner. One of the things I learned from my children when they were studying game design is that some of the best games are cooperative or collaborative games. We win together or we lose together. You can't lose this game, but you win the game together, and you win the game individually in terms of the revelations and insights that you've had. I also believe that people change and learn when their fundamental beliefs are shifted. And so the objective whenever I put any kind of intervention together is to try and shift belief. And again, that's one of the reasons why play is so useful, because we come at the problem in a very unusual way. So that instead of just going into the rote way in which we've always approached something or we've always thought about something, we're almost forced to think differently about it. And I think that's very powerful. Personal revelation is part of it, and that happens during the course of the game. I also love the fact that our brains don't switch off the minute we walk out the door, that they continue to cogitate and to reflect.
I've seen some people, as soon as you walk over the doors, the light bulb goes off and they're hangry.
Fortunately, we don't have to be consciously thinking for our brains to keep working. I think very often what will happen is a seed will be planted and then something happens a little bit later in the day or the following morning and they go, oh, and they put two and two together. There's a wonderful theory of learning developed by a man called David Kolb. And I love what he says. He says learning or change happens through 4 phases. You can start anywhere in the process, but I usually start with an experience. So the game is an experience. It's an unusual and different experience. So we get out of habitual ways of thinking. The second way in which we learn, or the second phase, is reflection. Reflection doesn't always have to be conscious. Sometimes it's actually deeply unconscious. And we'll have these little moments when 2 neurons spark and we have an insight. We learn next through the formation of theories and models and through testing what we've just seen or reflected upon against the existing models. And this is not always conscious either. Sometimes this is all happening in those trillions of neurons in our brains. And then as we formulate new theories and new insights, we will find an opportunity to practice them and see what happens. And that becomes a new experience. The game does that in different ways for each individual person. To come back to what you also were asking, Bernie, the game was originally designed to be part of the leader development program. And so the intention was they play the game and then they go into leader program where they explore their identity at a much deeper level. At this stage, the game is standalone. We are rapidly developing a short program that will go around the game so they don't walk out the door and that's it. It really does work well as a standalone, but I think there's opportunity to do a little bit more with it than that, especially within an organizational setting.
Jan, I like to ask owner-operator questions. The one I have for you is we're on Zoom. Vancouver's or in Eastern Ontario, you're in South Africa. As an owner-operator, are you able to bill on Zoom? Do you have cities within car drive that you can work? Do you live in airports? As an owner-operator, how do you make this globalization work as a business person?
Honestly, we're not quite there yet, but we want to be. And that's what's really important. And Stephen Covey said just begin with the end in mind. So I have definitely all the design work that I do. I'm constantly thinking of what does this look like in a global context? If I can only run it here in Johannesburg with a group of people in a training room. So there are a number of answers to the question. The first is I would be delighted to climb on an airplane and go anywhere in the world. That's part of my retirement plan. I'm going to do this till I drop plan. And I want to be doing it in as many places across the globe as I possibly can. Second answer is that it's highly franchisable. The intention is to accredit facilitators and allow them to run the game under license. To answer the money question, I have a website that is fully enabled to receive income and people can book online and we can sort it out that way. An operator is hard work. There are never enough hours in the day.
You know what? That's true. The concept of leadership, is there a myth that some of us have grown up with that puts it in a box and that is like to say, if you've never had an apple pie, I want an apple pie. But if you've never tasted one, and then it can be regionally delivered. You can have one from Europe, the States, Canada, different spices, etc. If leadership is more than just I'm the boss, what are the myths behind leadership that people have that cloud their judgment and where they end up getting not on the mark, not necessarily running afoul, they're not going their best?
Yeah. That is a very big question. We could literally spend the whole hour probably talking about that. So the answer, first of all, is if I could find another word for what I call leadership that people would get, I would use another word, because leadership as a concept has been so tainted over at least the last 100 years, probably way more than that, that it often poses a barrier to even talk about leadership. One example, I'm going to check out a couple. One is that leadership is about a title. Leadership is about hierarchy. One of the clients I was working with recently said the most beautiful thing. They were trying to frame ways of thinking about leadership. What they said it isn't is stacked. I just love that word, that leadership is not a stacked concept. We can't necessarily get away from hierarchies. But leadership, in my opinion, should not be about power. Certainly, it should not be about power that is abused. Power should be used for good if you have it. And I prefer, in that case, to use the word influence. So the notion of command and control and obedience as the way leadership works for me is archaic. There are some very important shifts that have happened as we've moved into the 21st century. These changes have been happening gradually over the last 100 plus years. Milton Friedman, several years ago, like more than 100 years ago, said that the purpose of a business is to make profit. The way in which business worked in that era was command and control. It was follow the rules, stand in a production line, and there was no encouragement of independent thought or bringing your emotions in the door. We have this legacy of leadership that has gradually shifted. At the moment, we have three very big dynamics that have caused major change. The first is, and I'm just going to pass it by quite quickly because it seems to be the one we're always talking about. But COVID did a number on us. It shifted a lot in the way that we think. Digital transformation and the digitization of technology and of the way that work has been done is radically shifting everything. And so leaders have to lead differently in a world shaped so fundamentally by digital technology. And then the third thing that I think a lot of people don't think about, because COVID and digital transformation are right in our faces and we think about them all the time, but we've also seen some dramatic shifts in social norms. In my own country, just 30 years ago, or 35 years ago, if you did not have the same color skin as me, you weren't allowed to sit on a bench in the park. We can all think of so many ways in which social perceptions have changed. It used to be okay for largely white male leaders to manage people with an iron stick 100 years ago, 50 years ago. That's no longer tolerated. Think about the millennials, and we love to talk about the millennials like this. They're this infected group. I think they're wonderful. I actually talk about the emergence. Those are all of the younger generation from millennials onwards. They no longer tolerate abuse. They will call it out, sometimes to the point of extreme. There are all sorts of standards that have dramatically shifted. And leaders, and I was saying this probably 15 years ago, I think one of the things that leaders have to be able to do now, which they didn't have to do when I was 30 years old, is they have to lead or learn to lead people who have choices. Not just people who have choices. We had them. We just didn't know that we had them. This generation knows that they have choices. And so these are just a few of the dynamics. We can't keep leading the way we did 100 years ago. The challenge is that the DNA of leadership is faulty. Leaders today still carry the DNA of leaders 100 years ago because they learned from leaders in previous generations and they've observed and modeled their behavior. The systems actually support those old styles of leadership. The way organizations are designed and function and their processes means that we entrench ways of leading. Somebody asked me this the other day. They said, Janet, do leaders know that they need to do it differently? I didn't actually have any hesitation in saying I think the majority of them do. The challenge is that the system is so entrenched that the system pushes back if they do it differently, and they actually don't have a clue how to do it. That's where we come in, because we want to show people how to do it differently. I've spent a lot of time thinking about how do you lead without power? How do you lead without hierarchy? Leadership is fundamentally about influencing people. How do you do that without a title, without a stick? I think it's doable.
It's funny, this conversation going to be frozen at this moment in time, and it may change dramatically a year from now. If you want to know more about the game and either how to become a facilitator or how to buy it for your company, or how do you buy a book based on the game, or how do you sign up for courses, how do we get a hold of you, and what one overarching goal do you have for leadership?
Oh, wow. How do you get a hold of me? Email is always a good way, but I also have a LinkedIn profile. If you go to my LinkedIn profile, you'll find a link to my website. We're still busy doing some work on that, but we've created a bit of a journey for people to find some of the things that we're up to. Those are probably the two best ways to get a hold of me. You're always welcome to set up a time to talk to me. So there's also a link on my website. You asked my wish for leadership, or why. Let me say, why do I think leadership matters? We spoke right at the beginning of the conversation about wicked problems. We have an increasing number of huge social challenges that we simply have to try and influence. You asked at the beginning, Bernie, what's my business slogan? It's maximizing leadership impact. Milton Friedman said that the purpose of business is to make a profit. I disagree with him 100%. I do recognize that you can't keep running a business if it's not making a profit. However, I believe that the most important purpose of any business is actually to solve problems. And so leaders carry a huge responsibility. And if we will lead better, we will, number one, cause fewer problems. Poor leadership causes massive problems. But number two, maybe we can actually find the energy, talent, and brilliance of people and tackle some of these issues and make the world a better place.
I want to say thank you to Janet du Preez, my co-host, Wayne Pratt, and you, the Knack for Business listeners. Part of the reason that Janet's on this journey, she saw a top-performing manager unravel under pressure, not from lack of skill, but from never learning how to lead himself. That inspired the next series of actions and the game. If you're looking to have fun, lead all at the same time, and not make it a painful exercise and have engagement with your crew, reach out to Janet.
To reach the podcast hosts, email them at info@creativeinsight.com or by the website creativeinsight.com, spelled KREATINSHT.com. To reach Wayne at his email, wayne@motivateyou.ca, that is MOTIVE, the numeral 8 and the letter U.ca, or his website, motivateyou.ca. If you would like to be a guest on this podcast and share your knowledge, let us know. We would also appreciate your feedback on the content or format. Check the show notes for more details. For these podcasts, we like to acknowledge the support and thanks to the following people. Carl Richards from Podcast Solutions Made Simple, a renowned podcast expert. Fred Crouch, who is the Property Wizard podcaster, where Bernie is a co-host. Jovan Strika from At Hive, a co-working space that is more than just a space. Then Melanie Weber, Bernie's invaluable business partner, and Wayne Pratt from Motivate You Inc., who serves as both a coach and co-host of these podcasts. Disclaimer. Please note that the Knack for Business podcast episodes are meant solely for educational and general informational purposes. The information and opinions contained within are not intended to be professional advice on any subject matter. The thoughts, views, and opinions expressed by the participants are their own personal beliefs and do not represent the views of the podcast hosts or any affiliated organizations. It is important to note that this podcast is not a replacement for consulting with certified experts in your area who possess knowledge of your unique situation. The hosts of the podcast, along with any participants or affiliated groups, do not take responsibility for any actions taken or not taken based on the information presented in this episode. It is highly recommended that individuals seek guidance from their own personal advisors in fields such as accounting, law, or other pertinent areas prior to undertaking any actions or making decisions that may impact their financial, legal, or other aspects of life.